I'm sure that you live by principles, or you live generally trying to do the best that you can in your life, or even for yourself, or for your family, for others, and I don't blame you. I think most people generally are. But we may not realize that we contradict ourselves many times, and we can't see this unless we objectively reflect on our own actions and question for ourselves our own belief systems. And so I'm going to be doing that exactly in this video. If we decided that we wanted a new neighborhood park, how would we go about getting one? We could call together other individuals who want the same thing and could raise enough money to own and operate the park through donations by selling stock in a corporation set up for that purpose, or through other voluntary means. If those who did not participate in the fundraising effort decide later to use the park, we might require them to pay an entry fee. Obviously, we would be relating voluntarily and non-aggressively with our neighbors. If George didn't want to be involved either as a contributor or a park visitor, we would honor his choice. However, of course, another way we could proceed would be to vote for a tax to purchase and maintain the park. If a large enough gang of our neighbors voted for it, George's hard-earned dollars would be used for a park he didn't want and wouldn't use. If he refused to pay what the gang dictated, law enforcement agents acting on behalf of the winning voters would extract the tax at gunpoint if necessary. If he resisted too vehemently, George might have even been killed in the struggle. Wouldn't we be using a game called government to steal from George? Wouldn't we be the first ones to turn guns on a neighbor who hadn't defrauded or stolen from us? Wouldn't George eventually retaliate by getting government to turn its guns on us for projects that he prefers but we want nothing to do with? Wouldn't we alternate as victims and aggressors, as minorities and majorities? Wouldn't we just be taking turns directing the law enforcement agents toward each other? Through taxation, pacifists are forced at gunpoint to pay for killing machines. Vegetarians are forced at gunpoint to subsidize grazing land for cattle. Non-smokers are forced at gunpoint to support both the production of tobacco and the research to counter its impact on health. These minorities are the victims, not the initiators of aggression. Their only crime is not agreeing with the principles of the majority. Well, taxation appears to be more than theft. It is intolerance for the preferences and even the moral viewpoints of our neighbors. Through taxation, we forcibly impose our will on others in an attempt to control their choices. As individuals, we may not support taxation and other forms of aggression through government. However, the composite of our separate views, as reflected in our laws, indicates that as a nation, as a society, as a collective consciousness, we believe that aggression serves us. But aggression creates poverty and strife in our city, state, and nation, just as surely as it does in our neighborhood. How could it be otherwise? Aggression could hardly produce peace and plenty simply because we use it as a gang instead of as individuals. Using the same means brings us the same ends. It's plain as the nose on our face and just as difficult to see. Only by looking at what is reflected back to us can we observe it. Indeed, taxation and other forms of aggression through government are so taken for granted in our culture that one of our most popular sayings is that nothing is certain except death and taxes. Yet slavery was once a universal. Taxation is thought to be indispensable to civilization today, just as slavery once was. Advocates of taxation claim that since most people pay assigned taxes before the guns show up, they have implicitly agreed to it as the price of living in society. Most slaves obeyed their masters before he got out the whip, yet we would hardly argue that this constituted agreement to their servitude. Today, we have an enlightened perspective on slavery, just as one day we will have an enlightened perspective on taxes and other forms of aggression we now think of as the only way. Just as our ancestors rationalized slavery, we've created the illusion that taxation is legitimate. like the volunteers who continue to shock the victim at the insistence of the scientists in the Stanley Milgram experiments, we feel our actions are justified, perhaps even noble. We believe that we can create a world of peace and plenty if we are given a free hand to force those selfish others to do things our way. We feel taxation is indispensable for certain necessities: defense, clean air, water, helping the poor, etc. Instead, aggression in any form only hurts others and ourselves. We reap as we have sown. And so this is the truth, guys. It's not an easy one to contemplate because we've been going along with it and we feel like, well, everyone else should do the same thing, and because, I'm doing it as well. And it creates this environment where everybody's guilt tripping each other into allowing aggression because every law, including taxation, is backed by violence. And to come to that realization is to say, well, you don't think a voluntary world is possible? You don't think people can live voluntarily with each other? I mean, they do with pretty much everything outside of politics. How come we have to control people, and is that not counterintuitive? I mean, we even have ancient texts like the Taoist text, as Tao Te Ching, that tells us, leave people be, let people live their lives, because the more you try to control them, the more it's just going to backfire. Are we just going to ignore that wisdom? What about the golden rule? That's taught in pretty much every single culture on earth. Are we going to ignore the fact that, we wouldn't personally steal from our neighbors, so why do we have to hire some gang of people who have the authority to do it for us? That's really contradictive. And so I want to ask you more questions like this. I'm going to put them on the screen for you. So pause the video and think about these questions. Okay, because this really goes alongside what we talked about in this video. This article that I read is actually from 1992 in a book called Healing Our World by Dr. Mary J. Ruwart. So it's awesome to see a doctor talking about this, someone from 20, 30 years ago talking about this, in the Voluntarist magazine newspaper as well. There's so much great information that just most people never even get their chance to look at, let alone consider. And that's all I ask of you, is just to consider this viewpoint, to say, is it possible that we are allowing slavery in other forms and that the abolitionists actually warned us? Because they did. Is it possible that we're allowing aggression? We say we want peace in the world, but we don't know how to do it, so we think we vote some people in office, but we don't actually get what we want every single time. Is it possible that what we're doing right now is the same exact thing people did in Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, and it just turned to hell? It turned into democide, the #1 cause of unnatural death. Not quite settling with me. And so I don't really have an agenda other than I want humans to treat other people as humans, like, just everyday people, and that's it. So don't treat people, put them on a pedestal and act like they're an authority figure and give them titles and positions. That's pretty much the only agenda that I have. Is it really an agenda, or is it just a return to nature, coming back down to our reality? I'll let you think about that for yourself. Thank you very much for watching. Go to deliberator.us, that's deliberator.us for more. There's plenty of resources there that you can find. And of course, we have a newsletter that we do every single week where you can get these articles in written format. You can share them, print them. Feel free to. We have so much great information. Carl Jung talking about mass psychosis, sheriff badges today being the same badges as the slave patrol back in the day. And we have illustrations and animations. We have quotes from the abolitionists. And I think it's all so powerful. So if you want to empower your own life, build food forests, feed your family, become self-sustainable, feed your mind, have mental and physical exercise, this is helpful for everybody on every single level. Thank you very much for watching.